Hey, Frank, how you doing?
It was spinning.
My screen says it's now streaming on live on YouTube. Nicole, do you see that?
Yeah.
Yep, it's about halfway there. Frank must have had the magic.
Yeah, well, I was spinning here for about 2 minutes, so trying to get.
Must be you brought YouTube with you.
Yeah, something.
Yes, we are live on YouTube now. Let's go.
My big fan following, right?
Call a work session, Isabella County Board of Commissioners. Stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, a roll call, please.
Commissioner Green,
Here, and I'm in the county building in room 225 at a board meeting. Isabella County.
Commissioner Engler,
Here, remote from my home in Deerfield Township, Isabella County, Michigan.
Commissioner Jelzinski,
Present, participating from my home in Chippewa Township, Isabella County, Michigan.
Commissioner Horton,
Present, participating from downtown Drugs, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, Isabella County.
Commissioner Marino,
Present, participating remotely from my residence in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, Isabella County.
thank you. Commissioner Swaney,
Participating remotely from Mount Pleasant, Michigan, my home.
and Commissioner Hope.
Present, attending remotely from my home in the city of Mount Pleasant, Isabella County.
Thank you all. All present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. This afternoon, under presentations and special reports, we have a report from the HRC. We have a report from our funding position on the director of accounting for the jail project. Moving down, there's not any appointments to boards and commissions. Brings us to the finance and budget report.
Finance and Administration Committee is all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Criminal Justice and County Affairs Committee.
Criminal Justice and County Affairs Committee is all set, Mr. Chairman.
Item C is the Human Resource and Public Works Committee.
Human Resources and Public Works Committee also, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Tobin, is there anything under intergovernmental affairs?
Not tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. This is the afternoon.
Not this afternoon.
Margaret, anything under administrative controller issues?
No, sir.
Unfinished business or new business, we need a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved, Marino.
Support, Swaney.
Been moved and supported to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We have an agenda. Item number 4 is general public comment. At this time, Nicole, do you have any person in there that wishes to speak to the board?
At this time, Mr. Chairman, we have no hands raised for public comment.
Okie dokie. Thank you. That moves us on to presentations and special reports. This afternoon, we have the chairperson of the Isabella County Human Rights Committee, Maureen. Thank you for coming and give us an update on the Human Rights Committee or your annual report, please.
Okay, thank you for having me. I have a PowerPoint presentation, which I am going to try to share with you. So here we go. It should hopefully appear.
Sometimes it takes a minute. There we go.
Is it happening?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, whoops, I went too far. All right. Thank you really for having me, giving me the opportunity to provide you with an update on what we have been doing. I want to begin by saying thanks for actually creating this particular, committee. It has been effective in this community, and we know that, you know, through feedback from people that they have noticed that we are present and that we are doing some important work. So I want to say that you should be proud of yourselves for, you know, for appointing us and appointing the people that, you know, serve on this committee, but also for, you know, providing us with the funding to do the work that you have asked us to do. I want to thank especially the County Administrative Office for the support that they have given us, you know, so far. I want to really say thank you for the support that they have given me, you know, throughout the years that I have served as the Human Rights Committee's, you know, chair. It's been a wonderful experience, and without, you know, without Margaret, Jessica, and recently Nicole, I don't know that we would have accomplished some of the work that we have done. So thank you very much. So here is my report. So please bear with me. So here is our charge. You probably, you know, the information is also on our website. So we are, you know, we've been charged to, you know, with providing programming and education to the county on issues related to enhancing positive interaction between diverse members of Isabella County. We serve as a liaison between the county and other local diversity and minority organizations. We also try to collect data regarding acts of discrimination or harassment within Isabella County and share the analysis of that data with recommendations for action with the Board of Commissioners and, you know, county administration. We are also charged with monitoring the actions taken by appropriate governmental bodies regarding acts of discrimination, harassment, report, and, you know, to report what we monitor to the Board of Commissioners and the county administrator. And then finally, we are to provide periodic reports to the Board of Commissioners and the county administrator on the extent of violations within Isabella County. So the question then is, to what extent have we met our charges, or how are we doing? I do believe, and the committee believes, that we have met our charge, at least to the extent that, you know, incidents are reported to us. And we do this by working through various structures and processes. And these include individuals in the community organizations. Individuals, I mean, you know, specific individuals in community organizations, as well as members of the HRC who belong to community, who serve on community organizations. We also do this through our subcommittees, as well as through collaborations with community organizations. I want to emphasize that despite, you know, COVID-19, the HRC has been very, you know, active. We're on hiatus for a couple of months, during which the county administration offices were, you know, were also on hiatus. But as soon as we were able to get online, we started meeting. So here are some of the things we've been doing. Currently, we have 3 subcommittees, and the subcommittees are the Community Education Subcommittee. And this is a subcommittee through which we did the presentations on the study of microaggressions against Native Americans in the county, but it's also the subcommittee that is charged within the HRC to you know, provide training and do education on human rights issues. We do have a law enforcement subcommittee, and then we have a disability subcommittee. Here are our activities so far. I start with 2019 because, you know, I believe that I was supposed to do a presentation earlier this year, but because of COVID-19, I didn't do that presentation. So that it was during that presentation that I would have mentioned that we had a successful event in 2019. It is now our annual event, Let Peace Reign. And it is an event that we initiated about 3 years ago to commemorate peace, the International Day of Peace. And it is generally September 21st. But in our case, we try to do it within that particular week. And sometimes it's a week earlier or a week afterwards. This year, we also held the same event, and as a result of COVID-19, we had to hold it virtually. At the moment, we note that about 362 people have visited our Facebook to view the recorded event. We also have participated in CMU's Conversations That Matter. And this is put on by the Office for Institutional Diversity and Inclusion. And through these conversations, the office engages in community discussions about various issues that are current at the time: gun control, racism, inclusion, diversity, and a whole range of socio-political issues. In January of this year, I made a presentation to the SGA, which is the Student Government Association, CMU Student Government Association. And again, to introduce the Human Rights Committee, as well as what that committee does and how important that committee is to the community, as well as the significance of the committee for students. It is, our goal is to make sure that students also have access to the services that the Human Rights Committee, provides, because students live in Isabella County. There are certain experiences that they have that are specific to the county, maybe experiences that they have had with businesses or housing. In fact, a lot of the complaints that we have received in the past have had to do with housing complaints. So we want to make sure that students know or understand that we are available to address their concerns, particularly if those concerns may not be addressed by the university itself. We assisted Perceptions Michigan, that is currently now in Midland, with the distribution of yard signs for Pride at Home during this COVID pandemic. We also had extensive distribution of yard signs for our Let Peace Reign and Black Lives Matter. So on one side of the yard sign, it says Black Lives Matter. On the other side of the sign, it says Let Peace Reign. This year, again, we were lucky to hire a graduate intern from CMU who has really been very, very active and very, he was the person who hosted Let Peace Reign event in September. We could not have done it without him, because he understood what to do with this virtual platform that none of us on the HRC knew how to handle. So Mark was very, very effective. But Mark also has undertaken, as part of his work for us, to develop a pamphlet that would help people, especially students and local organizations, any organization that is interested in starting a human rights group. And so he's, worked on this pamphlet and a PowerPoint. We are hoping to discuss the pamphlet and the PowerPoint at this month's meeting. Okay, so this brings me to again, part of our activities in terms of incident reports and letters that we have sent. We do a lot of letter writing, as you might notice. We had one incident report that we finally resolved, and that's the complaint filed by Commissioner Moreno. We resolved that and we sent a letter to Commissioner Moreno. And I want to say thank you to Commissioner Moreno for his patience in allowing us to, work through this particular process, because it wasn't really easy. We had difficulty, challenges, especially with scheduling meetings with the other commissioners involved. And then COVID-19 happened, and, things just simply got a little bit, wonky. But thank you again for giving us the time to get this resolved, and for, your patience. Our Disability Subcommittee sent a letter to CMU Facilities Management to address the poor accessibility at the ICTC bus stop in front of the Park Library, especially during winter. So we sent, it's important to indicate that, for people with mobility challenges, that there isn't really a bus stop there, but the location itself poses a lot of problem, especially when the ice is not properly cleared. We issued a solidarity statement on the George Floyd incident and Black Lives Matter, because we believe that we're dealing with a human rights issue. And as a human rights committee, we were compelled to address this particular issue, especially because within our community at that time, there were a number of marches. And, if we want to remain relevant and visible, we needed to, put together a statement that addressed, this issue in terms of human and civil rights. We also sent a letter to the Mount Pleasant Public Schools relating to their statement on justice, inclusion, and empowerment. Actually, we haven't sent the letter. We wrote the letter, we've reviewed the letter, we're going to, discuss it finally and, vote on it this month. And then we also have a letter that is to be sent to the Shepherd Public Schools regarding ADA accessibility. The letter has been written, we've reviewed the letter, we will discuss the letter also and vote on it this month. Already I have mentioned Mark Elgasma, who is a student in the Department of English at CMU. And, we hired him. We're fortunate to hire him this year because we had really challenges trying to find a graduate student who understood what the work that we did, and also one who was actually willing to work with us. And then, okay, so I think I've mentioned this already. Oh, sorry, I went backwards. My apologies. It's technology. I think I may have scrolled the mouse and it went backwards. So continuing in terms of our work, this is where we're talking about community outreach and collaborations. A number of us on the HRC are members of community organizations. I am a founding member of the Clare Grassroots Isabella County Human Trafficking Coalition. Another member is also part of that coalition, Elizabeth Husbands. We have members, in the Mount Pleasant Area Diversity Group, and we work with them. We have members, we also work with the Mount Pleasant Department of Public Safety. This is where the Law Enforcement Subcommittee becomes important. In fact, we have been working with Director Paul Laurier extensively on a number of issues, including most recently, the use of force policy. We also now have started working with Perceptions Michigan housed in Midland to also extend their reach. And then currently the community education subcommittee is updating our training materials related to diversity, inclusion, and human rights. We continue to work with a number of CMU units. So in terms of our future activities, here are some of the things that are coming up for us. December the 10th is International Human Rights Day. And we have, we discussed at our last meeting that we will do some recordings of some of the human rights articles. There are, by the way, 30 of them. So if any board member is interested in recording an article, just short video recording of an article that will be housed on our Facebook, please do let me know. We're also, as part of our human rights work, we're also looking at anti-racism work. In other words, we want to prepare ourselves so that we can also provide training on anti-racism, because that's part of diversity. It's also part of, human rights. And for this, we will do a reading and discussion of Austin Channing Brown's book, I Am Still Here. So the information will be on our Facebook as well as on our web page. We will continue our collaboration with Mount Pleasant DPS through Director Paul Loria, who has an open invitation actually to attend our monthly meetings. He reports, we provide him opportunity at our monthly meeting to update us on what is happening. Before COVID-19, we had discussed the possibility of co-sponsoring a town hall session or forum to inform the public on how to file a complaint, especially if a complaint related to police, harassment or police treatment or law enforcement. We will continue to work on better responses to any complaints regarding police violations of residents' rights. And then, as I mentioned, we are also working with him on the use of force policy that he has developed. We'll continue to serve on the Isabella County Collaborative. I attend the meeting, and I believe Steve attends the meeting sometimes. We'll continue to participate at CMU's events. Of course, right now we can't do that because of COVID-19, but we have in the past participated in these events. The Martin Luther King Day, Martin Luther King Peace Week. We attend the breakfast, and then we also participate in the march. We have participated in CMU's annual powwow. We do we table at the CMU powwow. And then we'll continue to participate in conversations that matter and other related workshops at CMU. Well, in terms of community events, we'll continue our participation at the Shepherd Maple Syrup Festival. We couldn't go this year again because of COVID-19. And then also with the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribes Honoring, Healing, and Remembering event. Again, this year we couldn't do that because of COVID-19. This is it. This is my presentation. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to present to you today and for supporting the work of the HRC. If you're interested, in seeing what we do, please visit our Facebook. And this is the address for our Facebook. Thank you.
Wayne, thank you very much. Is there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Jeliginski.
I just want to thank Maureen and the other committee members. I met with them back in January, asking them to review a playground development proposal for Fremont Township in preparation of applying for a development grant for the Wynn Community Center playground replacement. And I just got a letter, Maureen, just last week that indicated it was one of 18 projects in the state that was approved for funding in the amount of $83,200. So I will say the committee has its disability subcommittee, and it was the venue that I needed to get support from in the competition for points in that grant. It did put us over the top. So if you'd pass it on to the committee and thank them.
Thank you. Thank you. We're happy to support you. Thank you.
Mr. Swaney.
I just want to say that it has been my privilege to be the liaison on the Isabella County Human Rights Committee. And Dr. Eek has been excellent to work with, and it is very connected with the CMU community and the outer community. It's been a great leader this year and past year that I've been a liaison. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. It's been wonderful having you there, really. Thank you.
Any other questions? Maureen, thank you very much. Excellent report and
Thank you.
good work.
Thanks.
Moving on now to our next item. That's the jail project funding presentation by our Director of Accounting Services, Steve Konovich, our CPA. Steve, are you on?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep, I am here. Thank you. Hopefully, I think everybody has seen the spreadsheet, but I'm going to try to share the spreadsheet so everybody can see it. And let me know, I guess, once that pops up.
It's here.
Okay.
She's up.
Wow. I just texted my daughter and said, if I have trouble with this, I need you to come in here. And so, yeah, she'll be proud of her dad, I guess, that I was able to get it shared. But just to, like I said, I know some of you guys have seen the spreadsheet. We talked about it at finance. Oh goodness, maybe a month or so ago, I would say. And then so I wanted to, to bring it here and kind of go through it with all the commissioners, and we'll touch on, some of the information and basically just kind of start. I'll say that, the numbers that are presented here are based on the information that we had as of September 10th. I think it says that down here, kind of in the lower corner of the spreadsheet too. But a lot of this information we gathered back in September, put the spreadsheet together, and as it says, may not reflect actual amounts once they come to fruition. So just to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, and all this information is again based on the most reliable sources of data that we had, and I'll kind of tell you each of the lines where we got the information, and I took quite a bit of time to lay out this spreadsheet just because I tried to make it as easily understandable as possible. I know we talk a lot about spreadsheets, and there's kind of a running joke with Commissioner Horton on my joy of spreadsheets. I really don't like them that much, and so I try to make them as simple as possible so I understand them. I know if I understand them, then I think everybody will understand them too. So what I'll plan to do is kind of talk about these, the schedule. I mean, basically it shows, that the county should have sufficient inflows available to support the outflows based on this analysis. And we'll kind of go through each of those. And so what I'd like to do is maybe we'll start and kind of work giving you some explanation of what each line is, and then we'll kind of work left to right across the spreadsheet too. So then if you have questions, we can either try to take care of those right away, or save them to the end, or whatever's the most the easiest for everybody. But starting with the with the spreadsheet, and starting with line 5, as it says here, the turbine revenue northern project. So the basis for this revenue is, kind of just work across a few of these lines. But the overall basis for, for these revenues, the first revenue was That's the budgeted revenue for the project. That's in the 2021 budget. I think initially that number was, and Nicole would be able to support this a little better, but that number was about 900,000, I think. And then we made some adjustments to get that to a, not 100% completion. But Nicole, I can't recall if that was maybe 82% completion was kind of our estimate, or what. Does that?
I think you're spot on, Steve. It was
Okay.
114 turbines, I believe, out of the 136 would be 84%.
84%. Okay. All right. So that's roughly 84%. And remember, my understanding that this is a very conservative estimate of the revenues that will be available. As all the commissioners know, Mr. Preston and Equalization, they are very careful and very concise with their determinations of and if they're going to err, they're going to err up to the side of being conservative and estimating that number potentially a little bit lower, less revenue to not overextend that is. And I think Pete and his team do a really good job with that. So that that 2021 number was what we budgeted to collect from those turbines for that fiscal year. And then going forward there from 2022 forward, these numbers are based on in 2022 100% completion, 100% taxable value, and there is an analysis that the state does, and I think it's like form 4565, I believe, or something like that amortizes or reduces the level of revenue
Steve?
Yes.
Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's some background noise that we're hearing that's kind of hard for people to hear you. If everyone would mute their microphone, except for Steve, perhaps that would help. I can hear some stuff happening in the background, which generally is not a problem, but I think it's going to be a problem with people hearing you, Steve. So if everybody but Steve could mute, that would be helpful. Let me mute you.
Yes. Okay. So
Steve, a question
Yes, sir.
first on that line E. And maybe you spoke about it, but that's at 50%, correct?
It's 84%.
But no, that's percent of the windmills. But I'm talking the taxable value, the industrial personal property tax is only supposed to be about 50% on the first year.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman, because it's still under construction and not
Right.
operational. That is correct.
you.
It is
Yes,
at
I'm sorry.
50%.
That's why when you're jumping over here to 22, they'll all be there, but that'll be the first 100%, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I didn't want to lose $1 million over this thing.
I'm sorry, Chairman. Yes, no. Thank you, Nicole, for the clarification. So then as we move into the subsequent years, this is 100 excuse me 100% of 100% of 100%, and so 2022 was the peak, that 2.4 million, and then basically the amortization and the reductions of that revenue is driven off of the state's formula. It goes from a full 100% to, and I'll just read the numbers, but it's like 80%, 75%. It kind of incrementally goes down each year. It's not exactly 5% each year. There's some years that it jumps down 10%. So it goes to 75% and 70%, 60%, 50%, and it kind of bottoms. It hits the bottom down here on 2031 at, as you can see here, at 30% of that original amount, and those are, like I said, those are percentages that have been set by the state and so forth. So we're kind of having to live within their with their set parameters. And then as you can see, that number carries this spreadsheet goes out 40 years, so I won't go way out to the right, but basically that 720, stays the same as we move forward.
Steve?
Yes, sir.
Jerry Jelazinski, question.
Yes, Jerry.
I know the chart says the Turbine Revenue's Northern project, that does not include the co-township revenues from the turbines? Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, that is correct. Correct, Nicole?
That is correct. Yes, no co-turbines in this analysis.
Thank you.
Yep. And
It's in the budget right now.
and if I recall, Nicole, is it 134 turbines? Is that what you said?
It's in our budget right now.
136 in the northern.
36. Okay. All right. So so that's just that project.
Steve,
and
I have a question too, Steve.
Yes.
Now, this revenue, does it include township revenue, or is it just to the county revenue?
Just county. Yeah. So it's just the county portion. Yeah. And one of the things, Commissioner, I don't know if you can see down here towards the bottom, but line 24 says turbine revenue is based on equalization projects or projections of completion and constant tax rate of 6.61 mils. So just county mills, and they're included in that.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, so that's line 5. Moving to line 7, the jail debt payments, principal and interest, and basically what this is taking that project, the estimated project, and the last information that we had for that project was the principal component of that over the life of the project was 41.5 million. So I think that was the most recent estimate that we had, and then the municipal advisors provided us the amortization schedules. So we have the amortization schedules taking the borrowing of 41.5 million and then spreading that over 40 years of amortization. Again, principal and interest, and that was at 2.25% interest. And so I think, obviously that's their estimation of what the interest rate will be. I kind of looked at municipal bond rates. 20-year rates were about 1.85. 30-year rates were about 2.05. So, 10 more years, it kind of makes sense that they used, I think, a reasonable interest rate of 2.25. Obviously, if the interest rate is better, then less interest would have to be paid over the life of the project. But that's line 7. That's where that's coming from. And we'll get into the mechanics of this in just a second, but I just kind of wanted to explain the logic behind the lines. So the next line, line 12, the estimated MERS payments. What these are the first year for 2021 is what was budgeted for the 2021 budget year, and based on what we knew was going to be the actuarially required contributions of 1,421,000. Then as we moved forward, we looked at the 2022 year. This 1,916,000 was based on the actuarial. MERS does their actuarial studies each year and produces an actuarially determined contribution amount, and that 1,916,000 for 2022 was based on the most recent actuarial study that we had at that point. So that's where that number comes from. And then the rest of these years, starting with this 1,925,000 and carrying that all the way out to 2038, as you can see here, 2038 is their estimated last payment, the estimated last payment of 17,000. So all of those years in between, so basically 15 years from 2023 way out there to 2038 was based on the spreadsheets provided by MERS when you as commissioners made that determination of doing that kind of that phase in. I think it was option 1 maybe, if I recall, when MERS came and went through that presentation with you as commissioners and your election to select that option, spread those payments out, and so they provided an analysis of that and their expected contribution amounts, for those next 15 years. So again, that is from their, that outside source from MERS. And I feel very comfortable with those numbers. Looking at this number right here for 2022, their number on their estimated number from their spreadsheet compared to the actual number on the actuarial study was about $20,000 different. So I felt really comfortable with that, kind of their expectations of what those numbers will be over the next 15 years. So those I think are relatively solid numbers. But one thing you kind of to keep in mind is, that difference, that number is actually lower than the initial estimation by about 20,000. So again, if you said, okay, well, if that trend were to keep up, if it's lower going into the future, the expectation would be is hopefully you'll have to pay less, as you go into those next 15 years. And $20,000 a year for 15 years. I mean, in theory, the numbers could be, $300,000 less, which would be to the positive to the county, that you'd have to put money in, less money into the plan than expected. But just something to, kind of keep in mind that these are all, based on those assumptions and that type of thing. But, that we can't predict the future, unfortunately. The past doesn't allow us to unfortunately predict the future, but that's the best estimates that we have. And then finally going to line 14, what we did here is this is based on, again, the 2021 budget. The expectation is that in that budget, you've budgeted to spend or to pay out that $1.4 million to MERS to cover your actuarially determined contributions for that year. And so what we did is I held that constant over the life of this analysis, and I don't remember much from all of my math classes, but one thing, as you go through and you work through variables and equations and all that kind of thing, it's always, a lot of times you need a constant, when you're trying to come up with what is Y or what is X, to have a constant within that calculation. We looked at 2021 and said, okay, well, based on our budget, we're going to fund $1.4 million. Well, if we're able to keep a level, future contributions of $1.4 million, that will kind of help us to determine what our overages and what our shortfalls are going forward. And so that's, as you can see here, that number has been held constant way out through this, 40-year analysis, but just so you can see that. Okay, so that's a whole lot of explanation for a few lines, but now we'll kind of work through the years, and we'll work through the first few years so you can see, what we're doing here. Looking at 2021, what we said was, the expectation is that we're going to collect, a little over $1 million in turbine revenues, but our debt payments for the jail theoretically won't start until 2022. Again, depending on when the project gets rolling and when the project gets completed, could this get extended further? I mean, I guess I don't know. I can't answer that question, but when will the first debt payments truly be made, once the project is completed and so forth. So we went under the expectation or the assumption that the debt payments wouldn't start until 2022. So we had a year of tax revenue coming in, no debt payments going out. So we basically had that $1 million available to utilize into the future, and so and so then in 2021, We estimate our payments to be 1.4 million. Our current operating budget was expected to cover that 1.4 million. And so basically what we come to at the bottom here is this accumulated overage. The expectation is that $1 million will go into fund balance. And as it says here at the bottom in line 27, the accumulated overage amount would assume that overages from prior year will become a committed portion of fund balance. We've had a lot of conversations recently about fund balance and the different components of fund balance. And so what I'm suggesting here and recommending to the commissioners is if that $1 million flows into the bottom line into fund balance, that you as a commission commit those dollars for future payments, for those future payments of debt and for MERS payments and so forth. So,
Dave?
Yes, Jerry.
Did we not use 800 or 900,000 of that to balance our operational budget for 2021?
I guess I know that we utilize dollars in the general fund that will come back to the general fund once the bonds are issued. And I think that's about that number, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
I don't have the budget in front of me, but I thought we had used a wind turbine revenues of about $900,000 to balance our current budget.
Yeah, I think so. And Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, but then I think, because once the bonds are issued, those dollars that you've outlaid out of the general fund will come back to the general fund from bond proceeds.
That is correct, Steve. All of the invoices we've paid to Clark Construction Company and to the architect would be reimbursed to the general fund once the notice of intent to issue the bonds resolution was passed by the board. We can ask for those reimbursements.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
so I think the general fund will, be made whole, and those dollars will come back to the general fund. And then the thought would be is that, you would commit, $1,007,000 basically of the fund balance at the end of the 2021 fiscal year to be utilized into the future, for these particular activities. Does that make sense? Did I explain that, Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And then so going forward, so this kind of from there, again, I'm not very complex on spreadsheets, but from there, we kind of roll these years forward. And so as you see, as we go into 2022, we have that full 2.4 million of turbine revenue. In theory, again, if our debt payments start in 2022, we'll have about almost 1.6 million in principal and interest payments due. So just from those two activities, we'll have roughly $800,000 overage, left over after that, the dollars come in, dollars inflow, and we make the payments out for the bonds. That'll leave us about, $817,000. Coming to the second component of the activity, we have about 1.9 million in estimated MERS payments for 2022. And again, assuming that we can at least maintain our minimum level of MERS payments of 1.4 million, we'll have a shortage, or a shortfall from these two activities right here of almost $500,000, $495,000. So what we come to at the bottom here of 2022 is basically the math of last year's ending balance of $1.6 million plus the overage from this activity up here, 817,000, less the shortage of this activity of almost $1 million, 495,000, to come to a accumulated overage, as it says here, accumulated overage of $1.3 million for 2022. so that kind of rolls through each year. I won't go through each year, but I mean, basically conceptually, 2023, 2020, these years all work that same way across the analysis. You get here to 2026 as you kind of get that sandwiching in the middle here, and when it hits 2026 is you go from, as you can see here, you had your the wind turbine was at 70%, as you can see here, and then in 2026 it drops to 60%. So you have 200, whatever the difference is between those two, $240,000 decrease in turbine revenues. The debt payments stay about the same. And we see almost the peak of the MERS payments, here of a little over $2 million. So as we get into 2026 and 2027, we finally exhaust the accumulated overage, that happens to be at the end of 2025, 426,000. And so mathematically, you run through this equation, and you have a shortfall in 2026, and so then we've inserted this additional line here of additional resources are needed, and so as it says here, estimated delinquent tax revolving fund transfers needed to balance, and so utilization of delinquent tax fund dollars kicks in about 2026, and then 2027, and again, just whoops, I don't screw up my formulas. You go a couple years there with utilization, and then as the payments for MERS, as you can see here, from 2027 to 2028, the payments to MERS drop substantially. You go from $2 million down to $784,000. So that's a substantial help, to the equation, and so and as that number begins to it stays pretty. How many years is that? 1, 2, 3, 6, about 8 years. It stays right around that $700,000 to $800,000 number. You have a few years there where you have, again, remember, just for this activity, there is a need for supplemental dollars to make the equation work out here for 2030 through 2035, and then after that, you're back to the positive side, and I didn't carry it out any further than that, because after that it cash flows itself. It runs through and pays for itself. So you have those lean years at the beginning, and you've got a few years of no additional supplemental payments needed, and then we have some additional dollars that are needed in those years, as you can see there, column 2026, 2027, then jump out to 2030 through 2035. So you've got those kind of additional ones there in the middle of the 40-year analysis that carries out there. So that is way more information than you probably ever wanted to see, and but hopefully you were able to see it on the screen, and with a little bit of my interpretation of that, that makes sense. I mean, and the bottom line is, I think there's a lot of ways you can cut and dissect and cut this up and potentially poke holes in it and so forth. But I think the numbers are the numbers. I think that there is information there that is supported by whether it's equalization numbers or it's amortization schedules from the consultants that are doing the bond issuances, or MERS or whatever, that that shows with some additional funding there with that they will, those costs will those outflows will be covered by those inflows of dollars into the, to the general fund. So I don't know, like I said, that's a whole lot of information and probably a whole lot of, might generate more questions than answers, but I'm happy to try to answer any other questions that there might be.
Steve George Green, I just got a comment.
Yes.
If you really look at this though, I mean, this is as of what, 84% you said on the windmills. If you were to take and add in co-townships revenue coming off of them right now, plus and add in that other 15% that's missing here. And there's another thing that's going to come into the equation. That number up there on turbine revenue would really grow to beat the devil. And that money's going to keep carrying over. And I estimate that you'll probably be able, depending upon when you borrow the money, because a year from when you borrow the money is when you generally have to pay it back. Also the interest rate and all that stuff. But there's some things coming down the pike that we're talking about. And I think those revenues right there will grow quite a bit in reality. Because in the budget, we put $420,000 in revenue that came out of the co-township windmills this year. That's sitting there basically alone. It's in the budget, of course, but I mean, it's sitting there with a turbine revenues on it, right underneath the general fund. So this isn't all done yet.
Yeah, I would agree, Chairman. I think that I think the numbers provided by equalization are I like I said, Mr. Preston does a very good job with his analysis, as he's seen and brought to you as commissioners before. That I know he doesn't like to leave you as commissioners hanging, and so I think he does a real good job of estimating his numbers and probably underestimating them to prevent any major issues down the road. So yeah, I mean, if there is additional dollars here, then absolutely, I mean, and it doesn't take much, if it's a couple $100,000 a year, well, goodness, it doesn't, over, 4 or 5 years, that's $1 million, and if these payments, if the first debt payment doesn't happen until 2023, well then, I mean, yeah, it pushes things out longer at the tail end that I know I'll be retired by, but in theory, that helps the county also because it's these middle years that are lean, so if you tacked on this debt payment here to the end of the analysis, we're more flush, down there at the tail end, and so where it's leaner here in these first 10 or so years, and so that has an impact. The MERS, I mean, what the market does has an impact. I mean, if the market goes up or down, that has some impact on your actuarially determined contributions. That would hopefully reduce those numbers that are required to be paid, and so therefore that impacts you positively also. So yeah, I mean, it's absolutely driven off of all those assumptions, but based on the best assumptions we have.
Any other questions for Steve on this budget?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can't see it. Who's ever got the hand up, just ask.
Oh, Jim Horton here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Just a couple things. I think it's more conceptual than anything else, but I think one of the things Steve mentioned down on line 27 there, the word committed. I think this, not necessarily this board, this current 2020 board, but probably 2021 board for sure, I think is going to have to address making sure that these dollar amounts become committed. Yep. Otherwise, if they're not committed, I mean, there's no way, I guess, future boards can be held to it, but I think this board here really needs to stay committed to those dollars, because it all goes away if if it's not committed. I mean, and then those numbers just go crazy and there's no way to estimate it. This again takes into account a 40-year budget, which is, again, I don't think there's any member on this board. Well, Steve might be around. Steve's he's young, but I think he's the only one here that's probably gonna be there. So I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, we haven't talked about the DTRF funds. Obviously, I think our treasurer needs to have a say. I think we're gonna probably have to have him in the finance administration to go over that. So we're kind of get that cleaned up, because in year 2027, there's some big hits kicking out of that. So I want to make sure, I know we can't really go into all that stuff right now. Looking at the revenues again, those are big numbers. And Jerry, I do agree with you. I looked at that too, and I go that where that money's coming back to pay. But obviously, when we get the bonds, that money's going to come out of that, and then it's going to have to be paid off over 40 years. So that, I think that's going to be a pushback to our system. But again, we got to pay for this somehow if we're going to build a jail. And there's only so many ways you can pay for it. You can take a millage out. That's not necessarily a good thing. You can take it out of your fund balance. There's no money there to pay for this. So, and like I said, I've been saying all along, the future revenues in this county on the wind turbines is a positive thing. And without that, I don't know what we'd be doing right now. We'd be having to go to a millage, obviously. I guess that's the only way I can think of to fund it. So it lays it out there. There's a lot of what ifs and how many's, and you know, we've had one big thing. Hopefully, we never see again in our lifetimes with the 2020 COVID, with some decreases in fund, you know, with some decreases and some monies coming in and everything. But I mean, as commissioners, I mean, I think I'm circling back around that word committed. It's got to be there. If it's not committed and people aren't serious about it, keeping it going forward for 40 years, you know, it's going to have to hit the community some other way, and that's not a good thing. So, all right, that's all I got to say. I'm gonna turn off just for a second. I'll be right back. So,
anyone else for questions?
Mr. Chairman, Jerry Jelazinski.
Yep.
Well, I did real due diligence on the spreadsheet. You can see it's folded in half. It is folded in half. So I haven't had a chance to look at it in detail. And I do feel comfortable that there are revenues that can probably see us through this jail. But as Jim had mentioned, this is a 40-year project. We have an operational budget that we're going to have to support. And we're going to have to be very, very pay particular attention to be able to maintain our current services. And over a 40-year period, we don't know what other kind of capital projects might pop up and be big dollar tickets. Plus, we have the annual COLA adjustment for employee wages. We have health insurance. So there is some questions. I wish I had a nice golden globe ahead of me that would spell everything out. But I think this has got potential, but we'll have to be really, really disciplined in our operational budget spending and understand we're not going to have a whole lot of resources as we go down the road.
Absolutely. Yep. I couldn't agree with you more, Commissioner.
Any other questions for Steve? Commissioner Holt.
Yeah, thank you. Not a question really, but maybe a comment. Just to reiterate what Commissioner Horton was saying, I think we've got to commit these turbine revenue funds towards these two big liabilities, the MERS and the jail debt. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I also agree with what Commissioner Jelazinski was saying. We've got to be careful down the road about, you know, we've got some expenses that are going to be increasing year after year. And if we're looking at that turbine revenue conservatively, I think that's good. That's smart. That puts us in a good position. And there was another point I was going to make about that. It seems to have escaped me at the moment, so maybe it'll come back to me.
Any other questions?
Oh, I know what I was going to say, Chairman.
Oh, go ahead, Tobin.
Yeah, I think it was the first year I was on this board that we restructured that those MERS payments. And I think prior to that, I remember there were a lot of peaks and valleys with that whole thing. And when we did that restructuring, it really leveled that out. And it makes it much easier to budget for that expense.
Any other questions for Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a comment.
Yep, Mister?
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, and I think this was a good strategy for us. We bought more land. We're getting more land than we need for the jail. So there's also the possibility and the likelihood that we will be moving out of our place that we're at now, and we will be able to sell that. So that's something to keep in mind too, with the continuing expenses that we don't know what they are, that a couple of commissioners mentioned. I mean, I think that's a great that we got more land than we need for just a jail. That's what I'm saying. It's a good investment.
Other questions? Steve, thank you very much. Keep up the work on this. This will change as we go down the road. More windmills come online. All the above questions will be re-answered again. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, if there's obviously, as we go through, I mean, the more we need to, if we need to, modify it, massage it and make whatever changes we need to make, we can do that just so we can, have a better handle on it. So you as commissioners can make wise decisions. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to, there's no appointments to boards and commissions. It gives us up to standing committees. Commissioner Horton is off at doing some work right now. Do you want to take over the Finance and Administration Commission, sir?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item is consider accepting and placing on file the November 12th, 2020 routine personnel items as presented. And
Support Marino.
There's no motion here, gentlemen.
Oh, okay.
It's not a motion yet. Thanks, though. We have several step increases and one separation in community development. So any questions on that item from any of the commissioners? Okay, hearing and seeing none, then that item will move forward to tonight's agenda. Brings us to item number 2, consider ratifying and placing on file the November 13th, 2020 invoice list in the amount of $140,587.74. The November 20th, 2020 invoice list in the amount of $156,230.87. And the adjustment list dated November 26, 2020. And so looking at those individually, the November 13th list, we've got the Clark Construction Company, October Jail Construction Services money that we talked about earlier would be coming back to the general fund eventually when we finance that project. It's $21,698. Our bi-weekly contract with HATS, tribal distribution for beach water sampling, postage for treasurer and general account, annual core mobile subscription for central dispatch, a couple computers for community development, $8,513.72 for a state reverse denial on a PRE exemption, which I'm going to come back to that one. And then we have our court's childcare costs. We have Wolverine Human Services on there, and then Highfields also. Going back to that $8,513 figure, I asked in committee for a little more detail about that transaction. The PRE exemption, I know that's the personal residence exemption, but I wanted a little more detail on what transpires there. And Margaret emailed Mr. Pickens, the county treasurer, he got back with us right away with some information on that. He said the state typically will tag parcels for audit. Actually, this year tagged over 150 parcels. This particular personal residence exemption was denied by the state. And then what happens oftentimes, the individual will put that portion of tax that they would owe, would go ahead and pay that to reduce any further debt accumulating from interest on that amount. So while the appeal is happening, so this individual filed an appeal. They were successful in that appeal. So this is the money that goes back to that individual. Not an uncommon practice, I guess. And then we have the November 20th invoice list, Preston Community Services, October equalization contract. We have Cole, Stoker, and Toski for October legal services. Our Manor Custodian, October financial services. Co-township remonumentation fees. And then our McBride Quality Care Day Treatment monthly contract. Moving on to the adjustment list, we have the early payment discount from Gordon Food Service that we always see. An invoice from Charter Communications that was decreased because there was a previous balance paid on that. And then we also have our Military Veteran Affairs Department refunded part of a grant in the amount of $32,830. So any questions on any of those invoice lists or the adjustment list? Okay, hearing and seeing none, then that item also will move forward to tonight's agenda. I see Commissioner Horton, are you back? Do you want to take?
I will take number 3 and let's see what we can do here.
Very good.
Next one up, consider approving the hiring of Mr. Steve Kreutzer as the Inspector 3, Building Official, Building Inspector Plan Reviewer at the step 2 of the pay grade 13 per the requirements of the non-represented personnel policy. I see Mr. Nieport and Administrator McAvoy here. Basically what this is, we have Mr. Tillman, the Isabella County Building Inspector, after 10 years of service is going to be retiring December 4th, 2020. And instead of going out and having to try to find someone and train and do all this other stuff, we have been very fortunate to find someone that is not only trained, but will be a fine addition to this county as far as what he brings to the position. Tim, if you want to take it, or Margaret, whoever wants to jump in. I know the recommendation has come from Margaret, but Tim, you're probably in the best position to speak on this. So,
sure, no problem. I think you covered it quite well. We do have Mr. Tillman retiring this Friday. We did go out for a search for the position, interviewed several applicants. Mr. Kreutzer came with a great level of experience and professionalism. His working relationship with our has been awesome. He has been working with the Union Township as a contracted employee and has been working with our inspectors hand in hand for several years now. So he's got a great working relationship with the office. He's got great knowledge. He carries all the requirements from the state of Michigan that are needed for the position. We don't have to send him out for any trainings, anything like that above and beyond what is normally expected of the position. So with that, we're just basically asking under the personnel policy for your approval to start him at the pay step 2 of the pay grade level 13 versus the higher step in that category because he does have such experiences in education and background as the personnel policy allows us to ask for.
Okay. Administrator McAvoy, I think Jerry may want to say something too, but Administrator McAvoy, if you want to go ahead.
I just want to concur with Mr. Newport in that the personnel policies do say that this request needs to have my support. It strongly has my support. You know, these inspector positions would be similar to looking at trying to get an equalization person in, an assessor. They're very few and far between to have somebody have the qualifications for the bare start for someone. And this person has many years of experience, is very highly qualified, very highly thought of in his field. And I will say that I talked to the Union Township manager, and he had nothing but wonderful things to say about this gentleman. This gentleman was worked with them on a contract basis, I believe, Tim, if that's not correct. That's correct. Yep. There's no hard feelings with the township manager that we're whisking this person away. Mark is very much in support of it. So I just want to say that I certainly support Tim's request. You know, the differential in the pay is very small compared to what we're getting.
Commissioner Jazinski.
I had the pleasure of working with Steve Kreutzer on a project for the Cultural and Recreation Commission when I was the commission's appointed representative to the CRC. And for a number of years, the Maury courts needed to have fire suppression put in over the court area. And it was a controversial issue. But I found that working with Steve, we were able to kind of meet everybody's expectations. This is an organization that doesn't get any governmental funding and just relies on its fees and charges and donations from the public. So it was a challenge to get this fire suppression in, but I found Steve was good to work, and we found ways to get this implemented without disrupting the activities and programs of the CRC. And he was very professional, and we finally did get the job done.
Any other commissioners have any comments or questions or anything? Okay, hearing and seeing none, that will move forward to this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, item number 4 then is consider approving the ambulance service agreement between Isabella County and Mobile Medical Response Incorporated, effective January 1st, 2021 until December 31st, 2025, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. So there was an RFP sent out in September. 3 companies attended a mandatory pre-proposal meeting. Only one submitted a proposal, and that was MMR, who has provided ambulance service to Isabella County for over 20 years. They serve on numerous community boards, attend numerous events, and work very closely with our emergency management department, our sheriff's department, and all the local fire and law enforcement agencies. I hear nothing but good things about MMR. So, Margaret, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or.
I would just say, Commissioner Hope, that you are absolutely correct. We received a beautiful proposal from MMR, as a matter of fact, so I don't want to have anybody think that their proposal wasn't top notch, certainly, just because we received one. It's an excellent proposal. They are premier in their field. They, as Commissioner Hope said, have been with here in the county for over 20 years. They provide wonderful ambulance services, but they are so much more than that, and all of the other festivities they are at, all the activities they are at, all the work they do with all of our first responders and helping people stay trained and helping them stay certified, and everything else they do in our community. We couldn't have asked for more if we would have had 20 proposals put in. So I am very, very happy to support the request to have us enter into this non-financial agreement with them. Commissioner
Marino.
Yeah, I just like to say that I was glad to get the communication that the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribal members will now be able to use this service as well. That was kind of an issue for a while.
Mr. Jazinski.
As I went around to the township meetings, I had Chippewa, Lincoln, and Fremont townships. I've talked to all the township boards and 2 of the volunteer fire departments. That's Shepherd Tri Township and also the Fremont, and asked them if they had any concerns with the MMR service over the past years and what they would feel about moving forward. I know that some of the townships were asked by MMR to provide a letter of support, and I'd indicated that when the issue came up, I would report to the county board their great support for MMR. There was a unanimous support from all 4 townships and 2 departments. They had no problems with it and very satisfied with the service.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Commissioner Horton.
Real quick, I see we have Mr. Hanson and Mr. McDonald on the line. I sit on the board with both of them on the Medical Control Authority board, and I just want to say that their organization is so professional. They are, I mean, it's just, you know, they are top notch. I think they represent our interest in the county well. As the sole provider of county services, I think that's a good thing. So again, I just want to compliment them. I know having to go and having a long-term contract with an entity and then having to jump through the hoops of going through an RFP process and doing all that's never easy, because you always want to think that, you know, you got blood, sweat, and tears into an operation and you've really poured your heart and soul. Look at all the numerous events that they support throughout the county. They're always everywhere. You always see their vehicles in the county. It's to compliment to them. They handled themselves very professional during this process. They weren't bad mouthing the board of commissioners or doing anything like that. They were always utmost professional. And I think they really represent the county. I echo what Commissioner Moreno said about working with the Saginaw, Chippewa tribe. Obviously, we want residents to have affordability and care if they need to have an ambulance service. I think they do a very good job on a personal level. I had the opportunity, I guess that's not a good term. I had the misfortune or fortune to actually have their ambulance take me into the emergency room one evening several years ago. And just according to protocol, like they say, they didn't try to steer anybody one way or the other. They asked where I wanted to go, if I had a preference. And, that is, again, everything they say they do. As far as some of the numbers reaching, we've got, they have to make reports to our board to make sure that their times are consistent. That's important. You don't want to hear from our constituents that, hey, I called the ambulance and they never came. I don't think that happens. I don't recall on the board ever hearing that. So again, just to echo, total professionals. That's how I would describe at least Mr. Hanson, Mr. McDonald, anybody from their organization that I've had encountered. Just a very professional service. So county's very fortunate to have them.
Very good. Chairman Green, did you have a question?
Commissioner Horton just answered, what I was going to say pretty much. He's running over, but we are very fortunate to have MMR in this community. They do a great job.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that item? All right, hearing and seeing none, that will move forward to tonight's agenda.
All right, next up, consider approving the First Amendment to the Medical Examiner Services Agreement between Isabella County and Edward W. Sparrow Hospital Association, effective January 1st, 2021 until December 31st, 2023, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. This is an amendment to the contract that we have with the Medical Examiner Services contract. This is an amendment to carry us through, as we had mentioned, through December 31st, 2023. As we've gone over the years with this, I've had the fortune to sit in on some of the negotiations. Margaret handled this very well. Some counties struggle with this. Some counties are not happy with their medical examiners contract. Some counties are paying way more in regards to this, not getting the services that we get. We have one of the rights of first refusal as far as who some of our examiners are at scenes. I think that's very important. So we are happy with the professionalism there. So I think, Margaret, you had mentioned that yourself and Sheriff Maine, and I can't think there's one other person involved, but I can't remember who that person is. But again, this is something that other counties have struggled with, and we are very fortunate, again, I think, to It's not a cheap contract by any means. You're paying for these services, but again, it's mandated that you have a medical examiner. You've mandated that you have investigators, and again, we have a good working relationship, and this is, to me, is at the rate that we're assuming this at. I think there's nothing wrong with this. So Margaret, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, just to give commissioners a little background too. So there are, there's the medical examiner who is a physician, who is a forensic pathologist. Sparrow Hospital Forensic Pathology System is, as the staff report says, they are credentialed, obviously very highly credentialed. In addition to the medical examiners themselves, there's also medical examiner investigators. So those are folks who get called out. So if we have a death in the community and whoever responds to that, whether it's an ambulance, whether if the person's taken to the ER, or whether it's somebody else, and call central dispatch and says, I walked into the house and so-and-so appears to be deceased. Then a medical examiner investigator will be sent out onto that scene. And those folks are generally our local people. So some of them are first responders, all sorts of folks are qualified to do that and trained to do that. Those are the folks that in our contract, we have an agreement for a first refusal for those folks to be hired by Sparrow. And the three people who will confer on that decision are myself, the sheriff, and the prosecutor. So that if Sparrow were to send us a text and say, Margaret, we're thinking of hiring Susie Smith. I hope there's not a Susie Smith listening, but we'll just use that as a name. We're thinking of hiring Susie Smith as an investigator. And if myself, the sheriff, or the prosecutor goes, I'm not comfortable with that. That's all it takes. No explanation. No, it has to be a vote. Any of the three of us, geez, we know that person. We're not sure we want that. So that has worked very well for us. Just to give you some idea, in 2019, we had 108 of those requests through Central Dispatch to send a medical examiner investigator out. In 2020, from January 1st to November 22nd, which is when I had the report run, we had 137. So imagine that, 137 times that a medical examiner investigator was sent to a scene. It's a lot. And then, how many autopsies do we have from that? I know that commissioners, we haven't got one recently, I think probably because of the pandemic, but I believe last year we were getting quarterly reports on overdoses having to do with drugs. Remember, we were getting those on a regular basis. And I'm assuming that they will be starting those up again. That's just one reason why a medical examiner investigator might be sent out on scene, and one reason why an autopsy might be done. So in addition to all of those statistics of how many times a medical examiner investigator went on scene, in 2019, we had, in 2019, there were 38 autopsies done, and in 2020 so far, there's been 34. So when you look at the statistics, there's a lot of work being done in our community on our behalf. And as Commissioner Horton said, yes, we're required to have a medical examiner. And I think that we have a very wonderful relationship with Sparrow. And I'm really happy to recommend an extension of this contract.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I had to unmute myself to ringing of the faxes and everything like that going on in the background. I'm the guilty party with all the background noise tonight, so I do apologize to my fellow commissioners. Commissioner
Engler wants to talk about it.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was looking at Jerry. He had his mute off. Okay, Frank, go ahead. Commissioner Engler.
Yeah, I know in the contract you have a 4% maximum increase. How is that increase determined? Is that similar to what the county offers the contract, or is that negotiated after every year?
They make that request every year. They want to make that request. Sometimes it's not 4%, sometimes it's 2%, sometimes it's 3%. It's a maximum of 4%. That's an automatic thing that's part of the contract.
Yeah, but who makes that determination? Does it do with the board?
The contract says it can be up to 4%, so it can be up anywhere from 0 to 4%. That's part of the contract language.
Any other commissioners? All right, hearing and seeing no other commissioners, we'll move that forward to the night's board session. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that completes the work of the Finance and Administration Committee.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll move on to Criminal Justice and County Affairs Committee. Gentlemen, what do you have for us?
We have one item tonight, and it's one that we're very familiar with. It's consider approving the fiscal year 2021 Community Corrections Grant Contract in the amount of $57,100 and authorize the board chair to sign the same. I see Carrie's here. Carrie, I know there's some minor changes, but one thing I would like to answer is it doesn't really tell us what we had last year in terms of the grant compared to this year.
It was about $7 more last year than it is this year.
Oh man. Okay, well I guess that's a good thing. It's not more than that.
Correct.
Tell us about the community corrections changes this year.
So it's a pretty standard grant. There are a couple of changes. The biggest change involves the criteria for electronic monitoring. Last year, the state changed the qualifications and required that offenders have a different criminology score. So they increased that. So many of our offenders would not be eligible for pretrial release to have an electronic monitor on, simply because their criminal risk to the community and for non-appearance would be too high. So we changed that program a little bit so that we could still offer it for operating while intoxicated third offense offenders, which mostly that is who used it before, but there are a few others. So that is the biggest change. We still think that we'll be able to provide a service. If there are electronic monitors for other offenders, the court has money in their budget that will take care of that if we have to. The other changes, we started an interlock device program to allow drug court participants to have the fees covered for an interlock so that they can work on getting their license back while they're in the program. Previously, we didn't do that, and many of them were not able to include that as part of their recovery. So they had a lot of barriers to getting to treatment, to getting to counseling, to attending court appearances, to working, to taking their kids to doctor's appointments and those kinds of things. So we're really excited about that. I think we have between 3 and 5 offenders that are taking advantage of that right now. So that's going to really help them be more successful later on.
So the interlock device is a device that won't allow the vehicle to operate if they're intoxicated?
Correct. They have to blow into it before they can start their vehicle, and it takes a picture of them so that they can confirm that that is who the person is that is actually.
Okay.
So I apologize if you can hear my little grandson having a fit in the background. So sorry about that. So yes, that's what that does. And then, so it helps keep the community safe, but helps our offenders work on getting a restricted license while they're in the program. So,
Which is a good thing. Any other questions, comments on this grant award? Margaret.
Carrie, I just want to really tell you that I can't hear your baby in the background.
Oh, okay. I can hear him, so.
You can't hear me or can't hear Carrie?
I can't hear the grandson. You're good, Carrie.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, thanks.
He probably wants an interlock device. We'll leave it at that. We'll move this on to tonight's meeting then.
Thank you all.
That completes the work of the Criminal Justice and County Affairs Committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Good job. That moves us on to Human Resource and Public Works Committee. Gentlemen. Mr. Marino, you must be muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, our first item is consider approving the Region 7 Area Agency on Aging Purchase of Service Provider Agreement, Addendum 1, COVID-19 premium pay for in-home providers, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. All of our business tonight is through the Commission on Aging, and we're fortunate to have Jen Crawford, the director, here to guide us through this. Thank you, Jen.
So this addendum before you, this is just an addendum to our existing purchase of service agreement that the county is currently in with Region 7 Area Agency on Aging. And so what this addendum will allow would be for us to give a temporary premium pay of $2 per hour for the direct service workers that would be providing services under this agreement. And this would be from October 1st through December 31st of this year.
Any commissioners have any questions or comments on this?
I was just going to say, at this time, we just have one client that is receiving services under this agreement currently.
Just one, huh?
Right now, yes.
Anybody have any questions or comments on this for Jen? If not, we'll move to the next item. Steve?
All right. Item number 2 on our agenda, consider approving the memorandum of agreement between Region 7 Area Agency on Aging and Isabella County Commission on Aging for the Tai Chi for Arthritis Program effective October 1st, 2020 until September 30th, 2021, and authorize the board chair to sign the same. Again, Director Jen Crawford here.
Thank you. So this, we've received the same funding for the last several years. So this is Title 3D funding that has become available to Region 7 Area Agency on Aging for evidence-based programming. And our Tai Chi for Arthritis program is approved to qualify for this funding. They have also, in addition to that program, they have approved for the agencies to provide the program virtually. So we are currently providing the program via the Zoom platform, and we can continue to do so, and we can utilize this funding to support that. So with this, we could receive $3,094.92 for the programming that we provide.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for the Director of Commission on Aging? No, we'll move this forward then to tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Steve. That concludes the work of the Human Resources and Public Works Committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on, there's no intergovernmental affairs this afternoon. Administrator controller issues, there's none. No unfinished business or new business. Bring us down to general public comment. Nicole, does anybody have their hand raised for general public comment?
No, Mr. Chairman, there are no hands raised for public comment at this time.
Thank you. We'll move on then to announcements. Are there any announcements? Commissioner Marino.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind all the commissioners that Lame Duck in Lansing started today. And so keep your eyes open for emails coming from MAC on the issues that we might want to have moved on, like the Raffaelli case, some other things like that, I participated in a Health and Human Services Committee meeting Monday, and they said, make sure that you pay attention to what's going on. There's not very much time left before the end of the year, and there's not going to be very much lame duck, but it's going to be possibly really crammed with stuff. So keep an eye out, please.
Any other announcements? Mr. Horton.
Yeah, just again, like to apologize to my fellow commissioners, anybody listening here, as far as some background noise that was going on, ringing of faxes and other things like that. So I do apologize for that. Again, just as a reminder, as you can see, I'm at work right now and wearing a mask. So please, everyone, continue to wear those. I know it's becoming a lot of people don't want to keep wearing them, but please do. Again, maintain distances, wash your hands, do all that. We're getting close. I can tell you the immunizations, while I'm hearing stories, I think we're going to probably start doing some immunizations in some local pharmacies, probably if not the end of this year, certainly the beginning, probably in January. They're coming. So we just got to stay on it and not let this get away from us again. So again, sorry about having to wear this, but I'm at work. So I've got people around me all around, and we definitely wear them while we're at work. So we are essential employees here. And yeah, it's been a long 2 days. We'll put it that way for me. I'm not going to go into it, but it's been a long 2 days, and I got a few more left in me to this week. So anyway, Sorry about that. Thanks again.
Any other announcements? Hearing none, motion adjourns in order.
Motion to adjourn, Horton. Support, Horton.
We are adjourned. See you gentlemen in about an hour and a quarter.